Wyoming Territory. August 1879, the wind tore through the canyon like a scream, carrying with it the scent of smoke, pine, and blood. Tasia Ford stumbled through the underbrush, her dress torn to her knees, caked in mud and streaked red across the bodice. Her breath came in short, harsh gasps. The rifle she gripped with both hands was too heavy for her, but she would not let it go. Not after what she had seen. Not after what had been done. Behind her, the last flickers of her family's wagon burned. The firelight flickered against the jagged walls of the canyon, casting long shadows over the wreckage. She did not cry. Not yet. The tears were somewhere far off, behind the numbness that had settled over her bones. She had run. She had fought. She had survived, and she was alone. Or so she thought. A horse snorted ahead of her. She froze, heart hammering. A figure sat in the shallow saddle, tall in the dying light, the brim of his hat shadowing his face. He dismounted slow like he did not want to scare her, the reins loose in his hand. "You do not need to point that thing at me, miss," he said, quiet even. "But you can if it helps you breathe." She did not lower the rifle. He moved closer. The light caught his face, then sun-browned skin, a rough beard, and steady dark eyes. His shirt was open at the collar, sleeves rolled, dust and trail sweat clinging to him. A revolver sat low at his hip. He did not reach for it. "You hurt?" he asked. Her lips cracked when she tried to speak. I do not think it is mine." He looked her over. Her arms were shaking now, the weight of the rifle unbearable. Her knees buckled. He caught her before she hit the ground. She came to with water on her lips, cold and clean from his canteen. He had laid her against a rock, his coat beneath her head. She blinked up at the sky, stars blinking through smoke. "I need to go back," she mumbled. "There is nothing left back there, miss," he said gently. "My brother." Her voice broke for the first time. "He is only 6. His name is Abram. He ran into the trees when they came." His jaw tightened. He looked back the way she had come. "How long ago?" "An hour. Maybe less, please." He did not hesitate. "Stay here. I will find him." "No," she said, trying to sit up. "I am coming too." He helped her to her feet. "What is your name?" "Tasia Ford." "I am Quillen Shaw." They moved fast, his horse trailing behind them. Tasia's legs burned, but she did not stop. Quillen tracked the boy's trail through the dust and pine needles with a hunter's patience. They found a broken button caught on a branch. A small footprint in the mud, and finally, beneath a thicket of ferns, a sob. Tasia dropped to her knees. "Abram!" The boy flung himself into her arms, his face smudged and tear-streaked. "I thought you were gone," he cried. "I am here, baby, I am here." Quillen stood back, giving them space. His eyes softened when he saw the way Tasia held the boy, her body curled around him protectively. They made camp that night under the shelter of a stone outcropping. Quillen built the fire, cooked the beans he had in his saddlebag. Tasia sat wrapped in his coat, her brother curled against her side, finally asleep. She stared into the flames. "They came out of nowhere, shot my father first, then my mother. I tried to get Abram into the trees, but I could not save them." Quillen sat across from her. "You saved your brother." "That counts. I should have done more. You did what you could. You are still doing it." She looked down at her scratched, bloodied hands. "I do not even know what we are supposed to do now." "You come with me," he said simply. "I got a place in Jackson Hole, not much, but it is safe. You can rest there. Figure out what comes next." She looked at him then, really looked his calm, his quiet strength, the way he had not once looked away from the mess of her. "Why would you do that? You do not even know me." Quillen leaned forward, elbows on his knees. His voice was low, not soft, just true. "I have seen worse and loved harder." Tasia blinked, stunned. He shrugged. "You are not the first person I have found broken in the middle of nowhere. But you are the first who looked me in the eye with nothing left and still tried to protect someone else." She swallowed hard. I do not know how to trust anyone anymore. Then let me earn it. The fire cracked between them. The night was quiet but for the rustle of trees. She did not answer, but she did not look away either. In the morning, Quillen lifted Abram onto his horse first, then helped Tasia up behind him. She winced as she moved. Her ribs were bruised, but she did not complain. They rode west, slow and steady. 3 days later, they reached Quillen's cabin. It stood at the edge of a high meadow, ringed by pine with a creek running down the back. The porch creaked under their steps. Abram ran ahead, chasing the chickens. Quillen opened the door for her. It is not much, but it is home. Tasia stepped inside. The place smelled of cedar and ash, worn wood and tobacco. It was warm, lived in, safe. She turned to him. "Thank you," he met her eyes. "Just glad I found you in time." Her voice was quiet. "So am I." And for the first time since that canyon, a breath passed her lips that did not hurt. She was not whole yet, but she was not alone anymore. Quillen leaned his shoulder into the barn door, easing it open with the care of a man used to quiet animals and quieter women. Inside, the shadows stretched long across the packed earth floor. He led the mare into her stall, checking her hooves for stones before brushing down her flanks. The rhythm calmed him. He'd learned early that some things couldn't be fixed by words, only by the slow, honest work of hands. Tasia stood near the threshold, watching him with her arms folded across her belly. Her dress had been washed and hung to dry, the coarse fabric stiff from creek water. She wore one of his shirts now, sleeves rolled to the elbows, hem tied at her waist. It didn't fit her properly, but she wore it like it had always belonged to her. "You keep a tidy barn," she said quietly. "It's the only part of me that ever learned how to stay put," he replied. She stepped inside, the straw crunching beneath her bare feet. "What made you settle here?" Quillen didn't look up from brushing the mare's neck. "War ended. Thought I'd find peace out this way. Turned out peace isn't something you find. It's something you build bit by bit." "You fought?" she asked. He nodded once. "2nd Colorado Cavalry." "By the time I was done, I didn't want to be around people much." She ran her hand along one of the stall beams. "And yet here we are. I guess some silences feel different than others." Tasia didn't answer. She wandered to the far wall where old tack hung in neat rows. Her fingers brushed the worn leather of a bridle. "You've been alone a long time. Long enough to forget what bread smells like from a woman's hands." She turned toward him, but he was still brushing the mare, slow and steady. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. "I used to bake every Sunday," she said, her voice barely above a breath. "My mother said warm bread could keep a house full of ghosts from speaking." Quillen finally looked up. His eyes found hers through the dim light and dust. "Then maybe we'll bake this Sunday." Abram's laughter broke the moment. He rushed in from the yard holding a crooked pine branch like a sword. "Mr. Shaw, there's a turtle by the creek. It's big as my foot." Quillen crouched to meet the boy's excitement. "You leave it be now. Turtle's done nothing to you." Abram nodded solemnly. "I just wanted to look." "Good," Quillen said, resting a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Looking's fine, hurting's not." Tasia watched them, something shifting behind her ribs. She had not seen Abram smile like that since before the road turned red. The boy's skin had color again, his voice sharper. When the barn work was done, they headed back to the cabin. The afternoon light stretched long across the valley, turning the grass to gold. Quillen pulled a tin of beans from the shelf and set it near the stove. "You ever work a garden?" he asked, not looking up from the pot. Tasia peeled a potato with a small paring knife, her hand steady. "We had one, back in Missouri. It was mostly squash and onions." She paused. "I like digging better than harvesting." Felt honest. "Honest work's the only kind I trust." Outside, Abram sang to himself as he walked the edge of the creek, a rhythm forming in his steps. Tasia glanced out the window. "He's healing faster than I am," she said. "He's a boy. They do that." "You'll get there." She set the knife down. "If I do." "What then?" Quillen stirred the pot. "Then you do what you want. You stay or you go. Either way, you'll walk stronger." The silence stretched between them, but it wasn't empty. "I don't want to go," she said, not quite looking at him. "But I'm afraid of needing this place. Needing you." He didn't move. "Needing's not weakness. It's just truth you can't hide." She turned to face him fully. "You say things like that quietly, like they're not supposed to matter, but they do." He met her gaze. "Then I'll stop whispering." A log cracked in the stove. Later, after supper, Abram fell asleep curled against the quilt. Tasia stood on the porch, arms wrapped around herself, the wind stirring her loose hair. Quillen joined her, leaning against the rail. "Stars are clearer here," she murmured. "No lanterns to lie to the sky." She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "I want to learn how to live without looking over my shoulder." "You already started," he said. "You just don't see it yet." She studied him for a long moment. "You're not what I expected from a man who lives alone." "I ain't what I expected either." Tasia's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. "Teach me how to shoot properly. If I'm going to stay, I want to be useful." He nodded. "Tomorrow morning, we'll ride out to the ridge. You'll learn to aim at more than ghosts." She held his gaze. "And if I miss, I'll stand behind you till you don't." She didn't look away. "That's a promise. It's a beginning." The porch creaked beneath them, the night wind cool on their skin. Neither of them moved. They didn't have to. The stillness between them was no longer empty. It was becoming something else, something solid, something they could build on. The sun had not yet cleared the ridge when Quillen handed Tasia the rifle. It was a different one than the one she'd carried out of the canyon. Lighter. Older, but well kept. He slid the stock into her hands with the same quiet he used when gentling a colt. The ridge above the cabin stretched out in rust-colored soil and gray rock, with a few scrub pines clawing at the slope. Below, the valley still sat in shadow, barrels clean. "Trigger pulls easy," he said, nodding toward a tall fence post 50 yards off. "You'll aim for the knot halfway down." Tasia adjusted her stance, boots braced apart, the rifle wavered in her grip. "You're leading too much with your arms," Quillen said, stepping behind her. "Let your back take the weight. Rifle shouldn't feel like a burden." She adjusted, jaw set. "It still does. You'll carry it easier soon." His hand came to rest lightly between her shoulder blades, guiding her posture. She didn't flinch. That quiet trust had crept in overnight like frost on glass, thin, delicate, but there. She fired. The shot rang through the ridge, echoing sharp against the stone. The fence post held. "No splinter, no dust. Too far left," he said. "Breathe out before you squeeze. Empty lungs shoot truer." She nodded, reloaded, and tried again. They stayed there through the morning. She missed more than she struck, but her breath steadied and her grip firmed. Quillen kept his instruction spare, never correcting the same thing twice. She listened, learned. By midday, she split a pine not clean off the post. She lowered the rifle, her chest rising with the first real breath since the shot. Quillen gave a short nod, the corners of his mouth softening. "Rifle's yours now," he said. "You earned it." Tasia looked down at it, fingers curling over the worn wood. "I'll keep it close." They walked back down the ridge, side by side without speaking. The wind carried the scent of warmed pine and distant creek water. When they reached the cabin, Abram was crouched in the grass near the stream, squinting at something in the shallows. Tasia walked over, crouched beside him, and saw the small nest of stones he had built around a silvery fish, trapped gently alive. "I'm not gonna hurt it," he said quickly, glancing up. "I know," she said, brushing hair from his forehead. but it needs to be free." He nodded and pulled a stone aside. The fish darted out, gone in an instant. That night, the three of them ate cornmeal mush and beans on the porch. The lantern flickered inside, but they stayed out in the dusk, watching the line where the hills met the sky. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," Tasia said, her voice low, not playful. Quillen didn't shift. "I once walked away from a woman I loved. She asked me to stay, and I was too hollow inside to answer. I've spent years wishing I'd stayed." She looked at him in profile, his features cut in copper by the last of the light. "Did she forgive you?" "She never got the chance." Tasia didn't press. Her fingers picked absently at a loose thread on her sleeve. "I was supposed to marry a man named Reuben," she said. "He was my father's choice. I didn't love him, but I was going to say yes anyway, to keep the peace." "Did he die on the trail?" "No, he never came with us. He stayed behind to take over his father's store. When we left, I felt relief. I never told my parents that." Quillen nodded once, slow. "Sometimes surviving means telling truths too late." She studied him. "You don't talk like a man who forgets things easy." "I don't." The silence between them stretched again, not sharp but full, like a field waiting to be planted. Tasia stood, brushing crumbs from her skirt. "Come with me." She led him around the side of the cabin, toward the corral. Inside, she'd laid out a rough circle of smooth stones, each one the size of her palm. At the center lay a folded square of white cloth, weighted with a single sprig of sage. She stepped back. "It's not proper. No priest, no hymn, but it's something." Quillen looked down at it. "Your kin. I couldn't leave them in that place. I gathered what I could. I buried them near the ridge. This is for remembering." He knelt beside her and touched the cloth, letting his hand rest there. "You did right by them." Tasia swallowed. "I didn't want to leave them behind." "You didn't. You carried them here." She exhaled slowly, shoulders loosening as if something inside her had finally unclenched. When they returned to the porch, Abram was asleep again, curled on the quilt. Tasia bent and lifted him carefully, carrying him inside. Quillen banked the stove while she tucked the boy into bed. She came back out, arms folded, her eyes searching the dark. "I don't know what I'm building here," she said. Quillen looked at her. "You don't have to know yet, you just have to keep building." She stepped closer. "Do you think this could be more than shelter?" He didn't answer right away. The lantern cast his shadow across the porch. "I think if you stay," he said, "this becomes a home." Her voice caught. "And you," he reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek, slow and deliberate. "I'm already here." She leaned in, letting the space between them close, not fast, not certain, but with a kind of gravity that didn't need words. He kissed her, once, steady, sure, and when she didn't pull away, he whispered, "You're safe now." For the first time in weeks, she believed it. The first frost came early that year, brushing the tops of the meadow grasses in pale silver and curling the last of the summer leaves. Tasia stood with a basket on her hip, pressing her thumb into the skin of a squash to test its firmness. The garden had done well, considering the late planting. She had coaxed life from the soil with stubborn hands, and had answered her with orange and green gifts. Behind her, Abram chased a chicken with the single-minded devotion of a boy determined to catch something faster than himself. Quillen stepped out from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag, the scent of oil and hay clinging to his sleeves. He watched her for a moment, the way she crouched in the furrows, pulling the last of the carrots. Her braid had loosened, a few strands catching the light like threads of copper. She didn't see him yet. He waited until she rose, brushing dirt from her skirt. "You'll want to bring those in before nightfall," he said. "Ground's going to harden fast now." She turned, shielding her eyes against the low sun. "I'm not leaving anything behind." He walked over, took the basket from her without asking. "You never do." Inside the cabin, the light changed with the season softer, more gold than white. Tasia peeled apples at the table while Abram sat beneath the window with a piece of slate, drawing shapes that resembled mountains and horses. Steam curled from the kettle on the stove. The room held the smell of drying herbs and wood smoke. Quillen set the basket down, then turned to her with a thoughtful look. "I've got to ride into town tomorrow. Snow's going to close the pass if I don't get the winter supplies." Tasia nodded, slicing another apple. "You'll take the bay. She's stronger on the climb." "Can you two manage here a day without me?" Abram looked up. "I can feed the chickens." Tasia gave a slight smile. "We'll be fine. Just don't forget the flour this time." His eyes warmed. "I remember more than I admit." She wiped her hands on her apron. "What's it like now?" "Town, I mean. Quieter than it was. Folks either left for the cities or got older and stopped needing much. There's a new blacksmith, though, young, full of opinions." "Sounds like he'll last the winter, then." Quillen leaned against the door frame. "You want anything besides flour?" She hesitated, then leaned her hip against the table. "A spool of blue thread, if it's not too dear." He nodded once. "Blue it is." That night, as Abram slept in the loft, Tasia sat near the fire with her mending basket. Quillen read from a worn book, voice low, the words slow and steady. She didn't follow the story, just the cadence of it. It had been weeks since she'd flinched at a sudden noise. That realization settled into her chest like something earned. When he closed the book, she looked at him over her stitching. "Do you ever wonder what your life might have been if things had gone differently?" He didn't answer right away. "I used to. Spent too long doing that, but life doesn't owe us the version we imagine." She pulled the thread through. "I used to think I'd be someone's wife in a town with paved streets, that I'd have a life of small, known things. Needlepoint, church socials, a porch with neighbors." "You miss that dream?" "No," she said softly, setting the fabric down. "I miss believing in it." He crossed the room, sat beside her on the floor. "You've got something different now, not small, not easy, but true." She looked down at her hands. "I don't know how to be a woman in this kind of life. I was raised to be useful in parlors, not pastures." "You're more than useful," he said. "You're here, alive. Raising a boy, making something out of raw earth and grief. That's not a woman who doesn't know how to live." She turned her face toward him. "You see me clearer than I do." "I see you honest. There's a difference." Their knees touched. He didn't move away. "You've given us more than shelter," she said. "You've given us peace." He met her eyes. "You gave me more than silence. You gave me something to stay for." She rested her cheek against his shoulder, her body quiet against his. Outside, the wind moved low through the trees, not cold yet, but close. The fire crackled beside them. She whispered, "I'm not afraid anymore." He turned his head slightly, his breath warm against her temple. "Then stay." She lifted her head. "I already have." He kissed her again, slower than before, not as a question, as a promise. The winter settled in slow and deep, blanketing the valley in a hush that muffled all sound but the creak of snow-laden branches and the occasional call of a jay overhead. Tasia had never known silence like it, not empty, but full in its own way, stretched across the land like a quilt pulled tight. The days shortened. The fire burned longer. Routines slipped into place with the ease of breath. Quillen returned from town with the flour, the blue thread, and a surprise bag of dried cherries. Tasia didn't ask how much he'd paid. She simply soaked them overnight and baked them into a dense loaf with cracked walnuts and a crust like sugared bark. He ate 3 thick slices in one sitting, eyes closed, as if the taste pulled something warm from a place long gone dull. That night, as the wind scraped frost against the window panes and Abram snored lightly on his cot, Quillen stood by the hearth, watching the embers fall. Tasia wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and came to stand beside him. "You ever think you'd raise a boy?" she asked, voice quiet but without hesitation. He didn't look away from the fire. "I figured I'd die younger than I did. Didn't make many plans past 30. She tucked a corner of the shawl beneath her chin. "He started calling you Quill without being told. I noticed." "You sound like you don't mind." "I don't." She touched the back of his hand. "He needs more than just me. I see it when he looks at you." He turned to her, his face lined by firelight. "You both gave me something real. I can't put a name to it, but I feel it when I wake up and when I lie down. That kind of thing changes a man." Tasia searched his face, her fingers curling around his. "I didn't think I'd ever want a life again, not after what I lost, but I want this. I want you in it." He reached up and cupped her jaw, thumb brushing the line just below her ear. "Then let it be ours. All of it, the hard and the quiet and the good." Her breath caught, but she didn't look away. "I want to marry you, Quillen Shaw, not because I need a name or a roof, but because this place, this life, only makes sense with you in it." He smiled, slow and certain. "I was already yours. But I'll say the words, if it makes it real for the rest of the world." They married in January, on a clear morning when the air smelled of pine smoke and sun on snow. A circuit preacher passed through with a mule and a worn Bible, and they stood hand in hand beside the creek, boots crunching on ice-crusted grass. Abram held Tasia's gloves and grinned with both front teeth missing. Quillen spoke his vows with his voice steady as iron. Tasia spoke hers with her heart in every syllable. There was no ring, just a strip of braided horsehair tied around her finger. She never took it off. The seasons turned again, as they always did. By spring, Abram had learned to fish with a line and hook. He brought home trout with muddy boots and stories longer than the river. A second room was added to the cabin, built by Quillen's hands and Tasia's planning. It smelled of fresh cut pine and promise. Tasia planted early that year beans, cabbage, and onion sets. She showed Abram how to place the seeds with care, how to talk to the earth without rushing it. Quillen mended the fence before the thaw could buckle it, humming under his breath, the same tune he'd once sung to his horse in the dark. One morning, Tasia stood barefoot in the doorway, her hand resting low across her belly. The light caught her in full, and when Quillen looked up from sharpening his spade, he saw the truth in her face before she spoke it. He crossed to her, laid a hand over hers, and said nothing. He didn't need to. They named the child Ruth, after Tasia's mother, who had once said that love was made not in words but in the bread you baked and the hands you held through storms. Ruth was born in the middle of summer, her cries strong, her eyes the same steady brown as Quillen's. Years passed in the way that only contentment can measure, in small milestones and shared labors, in laughter across supper tables and the worn path between the cabin and the barn. Abram grew tall and sure-footed, protective of his sister, respectful of the land. He learned to carve and to raid, to harness a horse and to fix a gate. Quillen taught him how to listen before speaking, and Tasia taught him never to look away from someone who needed help. In time, the cabin became a home that smelled of flower and pine, of soap and newborn skin, of wood smoke and the long patience of love earned. And in the quiet of each night, when the children slept and the fire burned low, Tasia would rest her head against Quillen's chest, his fingers tracing idle circles on her back. Neither of them said much then. They didn't need to. Their life spoke for them, a life built not from what was lost, but from everything they had chosen to keep together. Always.